quadripoint is a place where 4 territorial borders intersect, and I want you to tell me exactly how many quadripoints you think there are in the world. If you said 1, you're correct, but if you said 0, you also might be correct. You see, Benin and Burkina Faso have a neutral zone between them. Both countries and the neutral zone all intersect with Togo. If you count a neutral zone as a country, then you could argue that there is an international quadripoint between Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso, and their neutral zone. There was also a similar situation with Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and a neutral zone during the 20th century. But is there an actual quadripoint between 4 countries? Well, Wikipedia claims there was one. It lasted 8 months. In 1960, Nigeria was granted independence, but Britain kept control of the Cameroons, giving them a quadripoint with Chad, Nigeria, and Cameroon. But after 8 months, Britain withdrew from the northern Cameroons as well, ending the only true international quadripoint between 4 countries in human history. However, Wikipedia doesn't cite a source for this, and I could only find one other article also saying this fact. If we look at the official map of the British Cameroons from 1949, it does in fact look like there was only a tripoint and not a quadripoint. However, this was 1949, so they could have changed the borders in the 11 years up until 1960. In other words, I don't know if there's ever been an international quadripoint between 4 countries, because of the sheer lack of sources on this admittedly trivial subject. But don't go yet! I haven't even told you about subnational quadripoints. Maybe there's never been an international quadripoint, but as a commenter on a recent video pointed out, if you zoom in North Canada over the provinces of Nunavut, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Northwest Territory, you'll see a subnational quadripoint. There's also a subnational quadripoint between Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. There's even a monument there where you can pay £7, or the equivalent of $9 to stand at the intersection between 4 US states. $9 a person to stand at the intersection between 4 US states, that's a rip-off. The USA actually has dozens of quadripoints because they draw their counties in a grid shape. Britain used to have at least one quadripoint that has been around since the Viking times, but since the border change in the 20th century, that quadripoint no longer exists. There is a rock, however, to mark the place where those 4 counties used to intersect. But don't leave! I haven't even told you about multinational quadripoint. When 2 subdivisions of Sweden and 2 subdivisions of Norway come together to make a quadripoint, they form a binational quadripoint. Wikipedia lists more than a dozen binational and trinational quadripoints. However, there's a problem. If you zoom in on Google and Bing Maps to see if a quadripoint actually exists, you'll find that they normally disagree on whether or not a quadripoint exists. Look, here's a quadripoint from Bing Maps. Now, let's zoom in on that exact same quadripoint on Google. It's different. Now here's a quadripoint from Google Maps. Now let's zoom in on that exact same quadripoint from Bing. They disagree on the vast majority of multinational quadripoints. In fact, the reason I opened with the Sweden and Norway example is because that's pretty much the only one they both agree on, so it's the only one where I'm sure it's true. So I made a Google Doc in which I listed every multinational quadripoint listed by Wikipedia, and I listed below the relevant coordinates on Google and Bing Maps. I then say which mapping websites agree or disagree on the existence of the quadripoint, and if you wish to read it, then the doc is linked below. But still, when 2 very credible sources disagree with each other, the only way to be certain as to whether or not the quadripoint exists is to find the official government documents outlining the exact borders of national subdivisions, with the exact coordinates, the exact longitudinal and latitudinal lines. And the only other way to be sure would be to go to the region yourself, see the quadripoint for yourself, and see whether or not there's a quadripoint there. And sadly, I don't know where to find the government documents, and I also don't live near any multinational quadripoints. But if anybody can find the documents, or does live near a multinational quadripoint, then can you please tell me where to find those documents in the comments, or maybe go to that quadripoint and then take a picture or a video of there, and then upload that picture or video online. That way we can be absolutely certain about whether or not these quadripoints exist. But don't go, I haven't even told you about linked multinational quadripoints. According to Wikipedia, which lists a total of 0 sources for this, there are 5 quadripoints on the Slovak-Hungarian border, 2 of which are linked. It is apparently the only pair of linked multinational quadripoints in the world. However, according to Bing Maps, only 1 of these 2 quadripoints exists. The other just slightly cuts itself off by a border. So it does appear as though there is not a single linked multinational quadripoint in the world. But wait, don't go! I haven't even told you about multipoints more complex than 4. According to Wikipedia, there are 3 quintipoints, 3 hexapoints, 2 octapoints, and 2 decipoints in the world. However, one of those decipoints is at Mount Etna, Italy, when 10 territories all converge in their borders at the top of Mount Etna. However, the territory of Bronte touches the multipoint at 2 points, meaning there is an 11-way intersection. Or in other words, we have got one hen-dessa point in the world. But hang on a minute, Wikipedia doesn't cite a single source almost for any of these. So I went on Bing Maps to check if they were real, but the problem is, some of these territories or subdivisions were so small, not even Bing Maps would give me an outline of them, which rendered me completely unable to fact-check quite a lot of these. And additionally, when you get like 6 or 7 territories, it becomes quite cluttered and quite difficult to know exactly how many of them intersect. For example, here's a multipoint in Finland. Wikipedia says that 6 of them link up, but looking at this map, it could be anywhere from 6 to 8 link up, but obviously maybe a couple of them probably don't quite make it there, they just get cut off. Of course, in Finland, they do have a rock marking the intersection between all 6 municipalities, and because that rock is there, that's what convinces me that this one specifically is probably correct. In fact, most of these more complex multipoints are linked at the top of a mountain. But what about that hen-decker point I mentioned earlier? Well, Wikipedia cites 2 sources for that. One of them's an article from a website I've never heard of before. The other one is a list of multipoints that allows for an error of 100 meters. Listen, I know borders are sometimes loosely defined, but 100 meters is, I think, where we draw the line. Okay, if 2 tripoints are 100 meters apart, then they're not a quadripoint, are they? Also, when he says he allows for an error rating of 100 meters, I actually don't believe him. The first thing he says in his article is that 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa all link up. However, it isn't true. They're separated by a border of 180 meters. I'm serious, if you go on Bing Maps and measure it, it's 180 meters. But wait a second, why does he say his error rating is only 100 meters and then show something separated by a border of 180 meters? I don't know what's happening here. I can assume there's maybe a glitch in his programming or it's a typo or something, I don't know. But don't worry, the person who wrote this article actually sometimes, but not always, included what his error was above the image so we know whether or not it's a perfect quadripoint. Well, would you believe it? The one over Mount Etna has an error rating of 11 meters. We were 11 meters off getting a hen-dessa point, but some dummy in the Italian government thought it would be a good idea to just, like, what, ruin us like that?